Hello and welcome to a Team More Robotics event recap. On June 28th, I competed in Macro Summer Broken with my brand new 1-pound plastic ant weight Outpost 31. This was my first time competing in the plastic ant or plant class, so I didn't fully know what to expect in terms of damage to the material I was using. I designed and built Outpost 31 in a very short period of time with the materials I already had available to me, and I based a lot of the design off of my dad's robot Kickserve, which I also designed some of the parts for. Outpost 31 is made entirely out of TPU, which is a very flexible and squishy 3D printed plastic, and I don't see it used to this extent in most other plants, which made me nervous about how the material would hold up. I was hoping that since plastic spinners can't slice through material, the TPU would absorb the hits. Outpost 31 is a lifter robot with a lifting arm mounted directly on the servo, and it has some long forks. It's also based on the greatest horror movie of all time, John Carpenter's The Thing. Before I recap my fights, I want to say that this event was fantastic and ran extremely smoothly and significantly better than the last macro event. This was probably the most fun I've ever had competing in an event. My first opponent was a Team Honeycracked robot called Incline. It's a 4-wheel drive drum spinner with an interesting twisted drum design. I was happy with this matchup because long forks are typically pretty good against drum spinners, and I knew for a fact I could outreach him. My strategy was to go straight at him and get underneath him before he could even reach me. This is exactly what happens when the fight starts, when my forks slide underneath his drum and I'm able to scoop him up and lift him against the wall. He gets free and lands a few hits. Incline gets some more hits, and then you can see a major flaw with Outpost 31's design. The chassis is so short and wide that when I accelerate to full speed immediately, the whole robot flips over. This doesn't happen when I gradually accelerate or if I drive slower, but this was my first time in the arena with it, so it took some getting used to. Incline flips me with a hit to the wheel guard while I'm figuring out the drive. Then he charges at my forks from the side, connecting with his drum and flipping me again. However, my forks clearly work well from the front because I get underneath Incline and push it, but one fork bends into his weapon and flips me over. I get under him again and manipulate him with the lifter, and then I get another lift which flips him upside down, meaning his weapon would be much less of a threat. I lift my opponent on top of me and slam him into the corner, but he rips my eyes off and gets free. Outpost acceleration issues leave me vulnerable, and Incline takes advantage of that. I bring the lifter up into Incline's drum, which flips him back over. Incline gets a hit from the side, and I get another lift just off screen. I waste an opportunity when I still haven't been able to get used to the robot flipping itself, and Incline gets some more control in. Outpost 31 gets underneath Incline, but I lift too early and end up getting thrown on top of my opponent. Incline gets another moment of control, and then another flip. I accelerate too quickly again, which exposes the backside. Then I struggle against the wall as I get pinned. Unfortunately, it happens off screen, but Incline sucks one of Outpost 31's forks into its drum, which momentarily stops it before the fork comes out. I get another pin and lift, and Jeff is clearly tired of starting pin counts.
That's a pin! 5!
I get under Incline but lift my weapon too early again and take a hit. I get flipped a number of times without any damage, and then get kicked back when I lift into his drum again. I keep getting hit, and then get a pin in. The fight goes to the judges after I take a few more small hits at the very end. It seemed pretty obvious that Incline won that one, so Outpost 31 would move down into the loser's bracket. It might have been a clear loss, but I'm pretty happy with that one overall. First of all, I put up a good fight and had plenty of good moments of control with the forks and the lifter. Second of all, Incline went on to get third place at this event, out of 39 plastic ants, so I put up a good fight against a fantastic robot. And then third, Outpost 31 took basically no damage. The eyes were cut off, but they were completely cosmetic and didn't affect anything. The right wheel hub had loosened enough for the wheel to slide on the hub, but it still spun and obviously didn't end up affecting the fight. The lifter had a small amount of plastic peeled up at one point, but I ran the same one for the entire event and had no issues with it. And then the forks had some minuscule little scuffs on them, showing that the TPU holds up really well to a powerful spinner. I took a lot of hits in that fight, and not a single one of them did any kind of functional damage to my squishy robot. The big issue here was the robot flipping over when I went to full throttle too quickly, so I needed to make sure that I drive slower and more controlled in my next fight. In the loser's bracket, I would be fighting Shul Shigana, another 4-wheel drive drum spinner, but with a less wide drum and a shorter chassis. Shul Shigana had a pretty good run at the last macro event and it seemed like this fight would be a very good test against a solid opponent. I knew I could outreach her, so I would try to go head-on once again this time, but I would also try to take it slow and not flip the robot over by getting to full speed immediately. Also, I added bigger googly eyes to help my chances, and because regenerating eyes seems like something the thing would be able to do. When the fight starts, I let my opponent come to me so I don't flip over, and I have a perfect start, scooping her up and getting an effective lift and pin. When I release the pin, Shulshigana gets a few hits and rips an eye off. I immediately get another pin just off screen, and then throw Shulshigana completely into the air. Then my forks bend around and allow me to get another pin. I do the wheelie thing again and take the biggest hit yet, followed by another one. Then we get into a pushing match and Outpost 31 ends up on top of Shulshigana. I flip myself but recover fast enough, though I end up taking 2 more hits afterward. Her drum grinds into the back of my robot and I'll come back to that later. Shulshigana hits me so hard, she flips over, and this is great for me because I get another 5-second pin which ends with a lift that rights my opponent. Our front ends slot perfectly together, which results in another pin for me. I struggle to release it and take more hits, but then I get pinned against the wall for an unexpected twist. I get revenge almost instantly and get a lift as well as some aggressive tapping. After I release, I do the exact same thing again, this time with a more powerful lift. Shulshigana gets an 8-second string of hits before the fight goes to the judges. This was an extremely close fight, and I was worried I might not have won, but the judges did give me the victory. I've rewatched this fight so many times now, and I do think this is maybe the right call, since my pins lasted 5 seconds each, which meant I was in full control for a decent amount of the fight. However, this was still a very close fight, and might be my favorite fight that I've ever had since I started competing with any of my robots. Again, no damage was really done to Outpost 31, at least not that affected any functionality. One googly eye came off, and the other one was dented in. One of the googly eye stalks was cut down a little bit more, and the switch cover was torn a little bit. It's not damage, but in one of the exchanges against the wall, Shulshigana rubbed pink plastic from the drum off onto the back of Outpost 31, and now it's stuck on there as kind of like a crust. I think this is really funny, especially since some of the blue rubbed off on the drum as well. The builder of Shulshigana, Mizuki, was nice enough to give me the drum at another event after it took some damage in a later battle, and it's one of the best trophies I've received after a fight. Also, the winner's pog I got from this one was very cool. It looks like a saw blade. After winning this fight, I would get to fight again in the loser's bracket. My opponent would be Huge Thunderstorm Nightmare, which I'm just going to call Thunderstorm to make things easier for myself. Thunderstorm is a multi-bot where half is driven by chaotic robotics and half is driven by chicken strip robotics. Each half is very similar, where their weapon is a lifter or maybe a grabber. It's listed differently on the builder's database though. This is a perfect matchup for me because I easily outreach them, and before the fight we determined that Outpost 31 is wider than both of them combined. They actually loaded in first because they had a spinner. Their spinner is the tiny model of Deathrang I'm holding in my hand right now, except it was glued to the top of their robot. When they got into the box, the white half didn't work at all, so they just set it in the corner as some sort of obstacle, I guess. When the fight starts, my opponent does an impression of Outpost 31. He does it again and I flip him over. Then I toss him completely into the air and he lands right on top of his own teammate. The crowd thought this was hilarious. I wanted to keep the fight going, so I grabbed the white half and start ramming the functional part of Thunderstorm. He gets back on his wheels and then flips himself against the front of my robot, and then I flip Thunderstorm over again with a push. I have some fun flipping him around, even though I could have let the fight end, but everyone was having so much fun I wanted to continue. We both do a bunch of crazy flipping and stuff in the corner, and I think this fight proves why control bot fights can be really fun and entertaining. I get a good lift in and then another one. I flip the functional half onto its spinner, which immobilizes it, and I try to use the other half to slam into it, but I can't do it, and I help the ref count them out, giving me a knockout.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Knockout!
That fight went pretty much perfectly. The only damage I took was some wires starting to poke out of the top plate. Huge Thunderstorm Nightmare's winner's pog is actually 2 halves of a pog glued together, which is pretty funny. Since I won, I would get to fight again in the loser's bracket, and was guaranteed to end with at least an even record. I would have to fight Shake and Bake, a Roach Robotics multi-bot that consists of two 4-forked control bots with no active weapon. I was really worried when I saw that their forks are longer than mine, but I thought I had a chance here because each of them is half my weight, so maybe I could control them. Shake's left side of drive didn't work from the start of the match, which made things look better for me, but this will be the very first fight that I won't actually bother fully recapping. The only thing I was able to do the entire fight was get this tiny little lift in. The entire rest of the fight was just Outpost 31 getting outreached and pinned, so I'm just going to play the entire fight sped up right now. They had much longer forks than me, so I couldn't really do anything, and I was eliminated from the tournament. However, I did take part in a rumble while there was downtime in the main tournament. In the rumble, I fought the full combat ant Taipan and its suplexer setup, the fairy weight Cancer Wedgebot, and the plastic drum robot Scarab. For the rumbles, I'm mainly going to focus on what Outpost 31 was able to do, because there was so much going on in the arena I can't cover all of it. When the fight starts, I get underneath Scarab, but get popped back by its drum, and then lift it up before Taipan pushes me. I have some trouble with the robot flipping, but I get a lift on Taipan. I get underneath Scarab, and some really crazy stuff happens as Taipan flips itself, running into my fork. Outpost 31 flips Scarab completely, and then I take 2 small hits. I join in the fun and make it a 4-way pin before Scarab flips Taipan, and I go after it on my own, gaining control. After riding over Cancer Wedgebot, I throw Scarab behind my back at Taipan. I get pinned 3 ways, and then get out of another pin with my lifter. Scarab's wheel comes off while I start pushing Cancer Wedgebot. I flip him, and then get grabbed by Taipan, where some more weird stuff happens. I end up momentarily stuck on top of Cancer Wedgebot as Scarab ejects its other wheel. I get pinned, and then grab Cancer Wedgebot as revenge. It seems like I get ganged up on, but then I lift and tap Scarab with my lifter, and the drum comes completely out of the frame. I know Scarab was damaged before the fight started after being in the main tournament, so that explains why it did this. The crowd loved this moment. Taipan grabs my face and gets a suplex, and then we were told the match would be paused. It was to put Porkchop's 12-pound robot in the arena as an obstacle to try to move it around. Taipan is able to push it, but it rolls into the corner, and we try to play with it. I try to lift it, but it just pushes the servo out of the chassis through the flexible top plate, because apparently a 12-pound robot's chassis is heavier than 1 pound. The servo still works though, and I fix the issue by just pushing it back into place. Cancer Wedgebot gets free and joins in, then Taipan puts Outpost 31 on top of its own servo. I get grabbed and partially unstuck, and then the rumble ends like this.
Die, Minibot! Die!
Since it was just for fun, there was no winner in this rumble. This was probably the most fun I've ever had fighting robots, because Outpost 31 worked properly, and it was completely chaotic and ridiculous the whole time. Damage-wise, the servo completely came out, and the lifter had some layers starting to peel. I also lost half the pupil of one googly eye. There was more downtime later on, and Outpost 31 still hadn't taken any damage, so I decided one rumble wasn't enough. This time I was fighting Shul Shagana again, the full combat ant Doomslug. However, Kevin decided not to spin the saw because he was fighting plastic ants, and Cancer Wedgebot, this time with a bigger battery. When the rumble starts, I go after Doomslug and flip it over. Shul Shagana comes in and hits Doomslug's saw, which actually bends it, which is interesting because the plastic drum was able to bend the metal saw with one hit. I push Doomslug, and he self-rights off me before I flip him again. Then Shul Shagana mysteriously dies, and Cancer Wedgebot gets underneath Outpost 31. Doomslug pins me and starts aggressively tapping, and then switches to tapping Cancer Wedgebot instead. I flip Cancer Wedgebot a few times and bully Doomslug on top of him in the corner. They all get stuck in the corner, and I help get them free. I inadvertently suplex Cancer Wedgebot, and then push him up onto Doomslug. I flip him against the wall, and then defend myself while I get high-centered. I flip Doomslug again, and then get stuck for a minute. Cancer Wedgebot does something, and I don't think it worked. Then we dance for a little bit. Cancer Wedgebot can't drive upside down because the bigger battery Nick used is pushing on the top plate, so it looked like I was the last one mostly functioning. That was the last grudge match, so that means that's it for Outpost 31 at Macro's Summer Broken event. Overall, I'm very happy with how this new robot performed, 2-2 with losses to the 3rd and 4th place robots. This event was probably the most fun competition I've been to so far. Slice Serve also fought at this event, so that'll be my next recap. And as of recording this, Outpost 31 fought at 2 more events after this one. Eventually I'll catch up and make the recaps, so thank you for watching.
Alright, if you can get it to the red corner, we'll give you
Oh no, the servo fell out.